Hey Faith Family, welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast at Calvary Bible, where we go beyond the Sunday sermon to explore some rabbit holes and to bring some biblical truths to the surface. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Calvary Bible Church, welcome to another episode of Beyond Sunday. Got Judd with us this week. Judd, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Folks out there are excited for all of our special guests this summer.
Maybe.
And you are last but not least.
I don't know.
So Judd's going to be with us for these 3 weeks, and then we are going to take the month of August off. So you guys get a break from me and whoever else is here. So Judd, I'm going to put you on the spot.
We can do it.
Do you ever listen to the podcast?
Occasionally.
Occasionally. Okay. So
when Trey was the guest, I needed to listen to that. So I did get to see you, Trey. Hopefully you see this, so we'll see.
Trey,
I listen to others as well, when Randy's here.
Yeah. Well, good. So you know that we tell jokes sometimes.
Yes, we do.
Do you have any jokes?
I did not bring a joke.
Okay, good. Well, I have one.
Okay.
So I was in TJ Maxx last week, and I was reading through a dad joke book, and I grabbed one. You ready?
Yeah.
Where do pirates get their hooks? Where do pirates get their hooks?
Oh, man. I don't know. From
at
their hand?
At the second-hand store.
Oh, man. Second-hand store.
That one, I was in TJ Maxx. I laughed out loud. I thought that was pretty clever.
Can you, let me ask you, can you walk in TJ Maxx and not sing the jingle, the old jingle?
I don't know the old jingle.
Do 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 TJ Maxx. You don't remember that?
No, I don't know that.
For all of you from the 70s and 80s and 90s. Susan and I went past the TJ Maxx last week.
Yeah.
And we both just simultaneously was like, right there it is.
That's
jingle,
catchy.
Jingle through the mind. So
we should have a Beyond Sunday jingle. We do have a Beyond Sunday jingle.
Oh?
Yeah, at the very beginning of every episode.
Yeah. Okay, but
it's kind of hip.
It is.
Maybe not as hip as TJ Maxx. I just know Maxxinista. That's like if you're a TJ Maxx customer, you're a Maxxinista.
A Maxxinista.
Like Lydia, the fashionista in Philippi.
Oh, yes. I didn't even know TJ Maxx was around anymore, to be honest.
It's over by Park City.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one of my...
Park City.
I don't go to Park City, but I go to TJ Maxx, Sometimes you can find some deals in there.
Yeah.
All right, so we're here for Philippians. As good as the jokes are, and I think they've gone up a notch since Randy's been gone. I stepped it up a level. But we're really here for Philippians. So
he's got 3 months to work on his game. So
he should.
We're expecting big things.
Ready to go. He does not listen. There's no way he's listening. He doesn't even listen. And I wouldn't expect him to. You know what? I'm rambling a little bit, but I bet you there's a higher chance that he listens over the summer than he does when he's actually here. So
probably.
If you're out there, Randy, we love you, miss you. All right. So we were in Philippians chapter 2, wrapping up chapter 2, actually. And the sermon title was Extraordinarily Ordinary Examples. Because we saw these two characters that Paul puts forward as examples for us, Timothy and Epaphroditus, who, by all accounts, are pretty ordinary guys. There's not much that stand out about them other than just their character, just men of high character. And so kind of the thrust of that message was to take a look at these two men, their character profiles, and be reminded that God's calling us to not be boring Christian people. I don't want ordinary to, equate that. But I think what the thrust was is to just remember that simple, basic obedience to the Lord and to His Word is really where it all starts. That's the foundation. Whether we have extraordinary moments in our lives or not, or calls in our lives or not, basic ordinary obedience is really the thrust of what we're called to. And Timothy and Epaphroditus do that well.
Display that.
Yeah.
My thinking on that was I was a little surprised. I wasn't sure totally where you were going on Sunday with that. And as you began to speak and teach, it hit me that I've read this. I read Philippians hundreds of times.
Sure, we all have.
I didn't think about it like that, and I did pause in your sermon and kind of scroll back through and kind of saw that sort of that play into, Paul talking about the rejoicing, his level of joy and rejoicing at what God is doing in his people. And then in the middle brings out Timothy and Epaphroditus. And I never caught it. I just never caught it like that.
Yeah. And
ordinary guys.
Yeah. It was actually in one of my commentary readings pointing out that this is not normal for him to bring up travel details in the middle of a book.
Yeah.
I was doing some scanning. He does talk about some travel details in the middle of some other letters, but not to this extent. And so it really does kind of set it up as he's putting these two guys forward on a pedestal in a way. Yeah, spotlights them because they are living out what he's been talking about up to this point.
Yeah.
And is, their care and love for the church in Philippi. So
what I find interesting in that is so often we're not always content with the ordinary. We look for the extraordinary. And even in our faith, we want God to do great things.
Move mountains.
Move mountains. And I think in that intertestamental period where God is just silent for 4 minutes, 4 hours, 4 days, for 400 years.
Yeah.
400 years. And next level, in one of the Old Testament classes, we did a timeline. And it was pretty cool to see like a full-size timeline on the wall. There's a lot that happens in a few brief periods.
Yeah.
There's a lot of empty space on a timeline. And it represents the ordinary. And there's when Paul talks about contentment in the 4th chapter, there's that element of, can I be content with who Jesus is in my life right now and how he's working, as opposed to, do I need to, be the CEO of a ministry, or do I need to, have written a book, or, the extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example on a timeline scale, just of Earth's history, right? To look across it and see there's very small segments of it that we see in biblical history of the Lord doing things, or even just human history. But then you take it to our own lives, and you can pick biblical characters out here, but think of my life and how many days are extraordinary.
Yeah.
Not many. If, right. I don't need both hands for that one. So it's like one of those things where we do, like you said, we value the extraordinary, but so much of our days are very ordinary. You get home from work, or you get home from this, that, or the other thing, and your husband or wife says, "How was your day?"
Same old.
Normal. And you can have just regular daily conversations about this, that, or the other thing. But by and large, we don't come home with epic tales, to tell our spouses or, whoever's in our life about what happened that day. It's just pretty normal stuff. But you said we, and it's interesting, we value in our culture the extraordinary. Extraordinary. Those words we pronounce them different, but it's the same word, I think, right? Extraordinary or extraordinary. Social media, I think, has really just like amplified that feeling for all of us, because if you hop on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is, you see the best of someone's life. And even that is in a lot of ways relatively ordinary, but we put our best foot forward on social media. And the things that get rewarded, or the things that go viral on social media, are the ones that we see. So if you're on Facebook, you're going to see your friends' stuff, or YouTube, etc. But you're also going to see the things that, have 1 million views or 1 million likes or whatever. And those are the things that I think we see them, and our tendency is to think, oh, I wish I had something that went viral, or that everybody knew about, or was extraordinary about me. And, I was struggling for the word on Sunday, celebrity. Couldn't find it. Just couldn't find it. But I think that's a dangerous longing in our hearts that we need to be cautious against.
Yeah. Think about that ordinary. I thought, as a kid, and maybe your folks, and others can kind of connect with this. But as a kid, when we went to a pool and there was a diving board, if somebody could pull off a cannonball, that was awesome. And then occasionally somebody would pull off an actual flip, just a single flip.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, they did a flip. Did you all see that?
Yeah.
YouTube's not made up of cannonballs and single flips off of a diving board anymore.
No.
Now it's a matter of it needs to be 60 feet into this canyon with rock walls on either side. It needs to be several flips and turns and just crazy stuff. And that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
The cannonball and the single flip are no longer, that ordinary just doesn't cut it.
Yeah. Well, and that's great. You see that kind of like ramping up in so many ways in lives and in culture. And yeah, I wouldn't want to make that dive, but somebody does. And people strive for it, and they go to extreme lengths to make those things happen.
Some give their lives for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah, certainly do. So we see that on a large scale.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think we see it, just to keep this moving forward, on like a medium level scale. I'm thinking like subcultures, and in particular, like the Christian subculture. Mm-hmm. So we have Christian musicians, we have celebrity pastors, we have people who are authoring books who, outside of the Christian world, nobody knows who they are, But in the Christian subculture, we think, those guys or those girls, those women they're spectacular, they're extraordinary, and God's using them potentially in really incredible, genuine ways. Yep. But if we hold them up as the only way to be successful in the Christian life, then we're selling ourselves short, or really what God has called us to. Mm-hmm. And then to take that to an even smaller level, right, from culture at large to subcultures to really mini micro cultures like this church or our families or the town that we live in. And, we might look at the culture at large and think, well, I'm never going to be a celebrity, and, that doesn't bother me too much. Or I'm never going to author a book, and so that doesn't bother me too much. And, thousands of people aren't going to know who I am. But even on a much smaller micro level, we still might have these urgings and longings to be successful and extraordinary in our most intimate groups. And there again, I think, is where it actually probably hits home for most of us, where we just want our lives to stand out above other people, but for our sake, not for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Just thinking about even VBS right now, to come in the building and see all of the sort of ordinary tasks that people pick up on, and they do, whether it was the decorating, whether it's security, whether it's moving kids from one place to place or making food. There's the sort of the ordinary tasks, and yet there are a few more extraordinary tasks of the person up front, whether it's Vaughn or others that are leading certain things. And, it's easy to say, well, gosh, it would be better if I could do something more extraordinary. But if you don't have the ordinary, you don't have anything. It never happens.
Yeah. And those, we'll call them extraordinary roles. If that person isn't doing the ordinary first, like if they're not building on that foundation of basic obedience, character qualities, concern for others, then their extraordinary, or what might seem extraordinary, is really going to be worthless. And oftentimes I think that's where we see moral failure and things like that, when we're just not doing the basic things first and foremost. And so I think that's important to keep.
It creates a culture that, if we go back to the rise and fall of Mars Hill, we see when charisma outpaces character, when the flash in the pan personality is more important than character, and our quest for the extraordinary provides segues for that.
And we need to guard against it, for sure. So the encouragement really to all of us and reminder is to guard against that longing, I think, in our hearts, to want to be or need to be extraordinary. If and when God chooses, He will use you for extraordinary things, and He'll put that in your heart and put that in front of you. And then you might need to have extra faith in that moment to step out on that limb and to follow where it might not make sense. But by and large, Monday through Sunday, it's ordinary, following Christ, and that is to be valued and praised.
So I would suppose that if we were to take the time and go through all of Scripture and make a list of those extraordinary, the Abrahams, the Jacobs, the Isaacs, the Moseses and others, and then make a list of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
That ordinary list is just going to be huge. And the few times that the extraordinary were extraordinary, they were just brief periods of time and small amounts. But boy, when we read our scriptures, we tend to kind of go from those extraordinary to extraordinary. We say, wow, isn't God amazing for these things?
Mm-hmm.
But he's likewise as amazing for providing the character in Timothy and Epaphroditus as he is for the Abrahams and the Calebs and Joshuas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good word. All right, slight shift, change of gears here. Still in the passage, though. So, Judd, you're in the counseling world, and so I thought this was a pertinent question for you. So, in verse 28, I'll read it for you. Paul says, I am more eager to send him, Epaphroditus, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. Mm-hmm. So, Paul's anxious, right?
What?
He's
Paul
anxious.
Can't be anxious.
He wants to be less anxious, okay? But then later in the book, and we'll cover this when we get there, but we're not going to cover it on the podcast because it's on our month off in August. But in chapter 4, I'll start in verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So Paul alludes to the fact that he is anxious about Epaphroditus getting home safely. Yeah. And he's already got a lot on his mind. Epaphroditus has caused him anxiety in his illness, near death, and he wants to be less anxious. And then as he closes the book out, he says, don't be anxious about anything. So how do we justify or rectify that?
Yeah, it's great question. I don't know the Greek in this, and maybe you or Pastor Randy could talk about that. But if we look at just the word anxiety, there's a wide range of what anxiety covers. Mm-hmm. So everything from potentially the slightest bit of concern to the worry that affects your GI tract and so on and so forth, that you can't sleep at night. What does Paul mean here? I honestly don't know the effect that he's referring to, specifically with Epaphroditus. My guess, though, is because if Paul's theology is true for him, my guess is he's not biting his fingernails about Onesimus. He's not saying, man, is the Lord going to heal him or not? Are we going to lose this guy? I can't quite see that. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit his faith to be white knuckling kind of thing. It does fit his faith, though, to say, this man is sick and, he seems like he's getting better, but I would like for him to be in a better place of care. I am concerned for that.
Yeah.
To me, it fits in that. Hopefully, I'm not twisting scriptures in that. But I don't know the Greek. Yeah. When we go to chapter 4, he's talking about the same anxiety, but he's looking at not being anxious. That's that worry that, oh my goodness, where's my next meal going to come from? Oh no, is my car going to get me here? Or what are they going to think of me if I show up late? Or it's just that constant chronic worry. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a difference in that. The chapter 4, if God is truly sovereign, then I have the ability to trust in what he's doing, and therefore I don't need to be anxious. If I don't think that he's really in control of all things, then I'm really left to my own. And I don't think that was where Paul was. So that's at least my thinking.
Yeah, where's the danger for someone? Because I don't think, Paul certainly isn't, he's not Jesus. So he's not, he's not perfect. Yeah. It is possible for him to worry, to white knuckle, to be anxious in a way that crosses a line. We don't know if that's the case here or not with Epaphroditus. But maybe for us, like what might be a red flag in our hearts or souls if we see our mind and heart getting close to a line where anxiety begins to maybe be a problem. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Probably the amount of time that you spend or you invest in that particular thing. So whatever that happens to be, if I find myself thinking about it, even talking about it, and and it's difficult for me to step away from that. That probably is moving from concern over to I'm obsessing, I'm worrying about it, I'm anxious about it, and it's beginning to control me. And anxiety is a control thing. And all of us have experienced that, I mean, we have our sin nature, and we live in a fallen planet, so we're all in that we can have that. So, but it does begin to take over, and here's where I think to be able to recognize what it is and take back the truths of Scripture and challenge some of the thinking that is there. And whether it's, God being sovereign and control, Paul writes in Colossians, Jesus is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
Yeah.
But no, what about in this situation?
Right.
Well, yeah, in this situation. And it gives me comfort and hope to know that he is in control, even in this situation, even when I don't see the way out. Really.
Yeah. So a red flag, one of the flags might be, how much am I thinking about this, talking about this? Is it consuming my thoughts and conversations? And then,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, no, actually, you go ahead.
If Eric or Jen were here, I think they would say, well, if it's affecting your GI tract, if you're having, maybe headaches or difficulty sleeping or some other physiological things. So
that could be another red flag.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe another kind of heart red flag. That would be like a physical manifestation of anxiety, maybe going too far, but a heart issue or root problem, like you mentioned too, would be control. How much do I need to control? And I heard someone say recently, was talking about anxiety, and he pointed out something I thought was pretty insightful. Oftentimes it's when the anxiety goes too far, or maybe areas that is a problem, is when we have a God complex because we are worried about something that God is defined by or is characterized by. So if it's control, who's ultimately in control? God is. Now, he gives us responsibility. He gives us a mind and, knowledge to use. But at the end of the day, there's some things that are outside of our control, and we can only do so much. And at that point, we leave it in his hands. I know
years ago, Randy had suggested to me that we take a sheet of paper and we actually look at the character traits of God. So he's ever present. He is all powerful. He's omniscient. Is that? That's all knowing. Yeah. All knowing. He's gracious. He's merciful. He's just, and all those things.
Yeah.
And if you actually write those kind of in a circle all the way around, and then you come to the point where you look at the thing that you're anxious about, or maybe concerned, but maybe bordering on anxious, and you say, what am I not believing on that circle? What character am I not believing about God that leads me to feel anxious? And he was helpful for me to see that a lot of times that's attached to an unbelief that is fleshed out on that chart.
Yeah.
There's things about God I'm not believing currently.
And then sometimes we try and put ourselves in that particular character trait of God and be that for the situation.
If I make all the right phone calls, if I stay up, if I do this, if I go there, and I, manipulate it in the way that keeps me in control, then it's okay.
Yeah, that's good. And that's helpful because we all have things in our lives that are important to us, and therefore we want them to do well and thrive. And if they begin to, not go in a healthy way, it's disconcerting to us, and it does cause us to be anxious to a degree. But later in Philippians 4, Paul says, don't be anxious. And then he gives us really there, since we're already there in 4, he gives us instruction, give those things over to the Lord, in prayer and thanksgiving. So we cast our cares on him.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Good. Any other thoughts?
I don't think so.
For the show today, the episode?
I moved over to Philemon. I had to find Philemon.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned.
I thought Timothy, Epaphroditus, does Onesimus fit into that as well?
Yeah.
And there's not a designation of a character trait of Onesimus, other than the fact that I forget the name of his master.
Philemon?
He's good. He's important. He's valuable to us now.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, for the kingdom, Onesimus is now valuable. God's done something, kind of workmanship in him that he's valuable. But he's ordinary. He's just an ordinary dude.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
But
yep. Another great example. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful because they're all over this church.
Two of them are sitting right here.
Two very ordinary
Straight
people.
up ordinary.
Yeah, very ordinary. Yeah, good. All right. Well, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
Today,
Thank you for having me.
Be back next week.
This has been fun.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for listening in. If you have any questions from any sermon, you can email those questions into podcast@cbcmj.com. We do love engaging with them, and we hope they help you engage with the text and with God's word throughout the week. So, love you all, and we'll see you on Sunday.
See y'all. Take care.
Thanks again for joining us on today's episode. And remember, our Sunday sermons are meant to lead us to a life of worship beyond Sunday.